This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, and I am your host for this week's episode, Paul Jasley, filling in for Mike Rapin. But of course, I am not alone. I am joined once again by two half-finished bottles of leftover New Year's Eve champagne, Kait Lamphere.
Hello.
And Zach McCreary.
What's happening?
Welcome back. It's been a whole week since we talked last. No, of course. We are recording this episode in advance. This is one of our sort of minisodes we do over the holiday season. So this is coming out as the very first episode of 2024. So again, thank you for sticking with us, making last year so great. I got to tell you, gang, 2024 is going to be even more. So our huge annual episode number 400, which I cannot believe, is going to be live on Twitch on January 21st. So put that in your calendar, 8 p.m. Eastern time, Eastern Standard Time, or even. Make sure you're here for that. We're going to do that live on Discord. No, live on Twitch. That's right. So yeah, come back for that. It'll be me and Mike and Kait back together to do that in a couple weeks. So we'll see you then. In the meantime, we're doing another one of these sort of mini-sodes where we're getting to know your IRCB contributor, where last week we were talking about non-comic book media that we enjoy. This time we're going to talk about our non-comic book hobbies. So things that we like to do in our spare time that aren't necessarily just sitting in front of a TV or playing a board game or things of that nature. So let's start with Zach this time. Zach, do you want to give us a little peek behind the curtain of what you are doing as a hobby?
Sure. Something that I enjoy doing is I like traveling a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, I mostly get to do like day trips to places that are around me. Luckily, Pennsylvania, there's a lot of really interesting places to go within a couple hours, especially from where I live. I'm within a couple hours of like most major cities in this area, and so I like doing that. The most of my money and travel has been to Vietnam the past couple years. I've been there twice, and I do like month-long stints each time with my fiance and her family. And so like, yeah, I love traveling. I love eating the local food. You know, like when I go places, I try to eat what the people there eat. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like my fiance's family absolutely loved that about me in Vietnam. Like they were so impressed because I am very much inspired by like Anthony Bourdain and Andrew Zimmern from like Bizarre Foods, where it's like, if you're going somewhere, at least try like whatever is presented to you, and you know, and get the experience of it. So I guess you could say I'm like a foodie traveler as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you ever come to Michigan, you have to eat a pasty.
Yeah. A pasty.
That's right.
That sounds really familiar. I think because my roommate is from like the Wisconsin, like Indiana area. So there's probably some crossover with like that kind of stuff. What is a pasty exactly?
It's like a little half pie thing with, oh God, what does it have? Rutabaga is the big thing. Potatoes, some kind of meat.
Okay.
But I was like, I think the lore is that it was given to miners and it would keep until their lunchtime, you know.
Makes sense. Really hearty, filling kind of thing, it sounds like. Yeah. Do you guys in Michigan...
Upper Midwestern burrito, basically.
Yeah.
Do you in Michigan, do you have something called Kringle?
Yes.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
That stuff is amazing. My buddy, whenever he visits his family in Wisconsin, he always brings back like 5 giant things of Kringle. It's this like amazing, almost like a strudel, but way more fattening.
Yeah.
And just, so much butter and so many different flavors. It's so good. It's so good. I feel bad eating it. It's that good.
We also have punchkis everywhere for about a week, and then they disappear for the rest of the year. It's very seasonal.
Oh, really? Is it like for a holiday, or what's a punchki?
It is kind of like a jelly donut, but it's like it's got custard most of the time.
Well, so not to interrupt or to actually too much, but
no, go ahead.
It's kind of it's a Polish thing, and I'm very Polish. So, and there's a lot of Polish immigrants in this part of the Midwest. It's basically you eat it on Fat Tuesday, basically Mardi Gras season. So it's like the big meal before your big like splurge before Lent starts, and it's it's like a kind of like Kait said, a jelly donut. Traditionally, it's prune filled, like a prune jam or jelly. You do see a lot of custard or raspberries pretty popular. So yeah, and in places that have a lot of Polish immigrants, punchki are very popular.
Okay. My area is very German. And
Okay.
on Fat Tuesday, we have Fastnacht Day, which is basically a really boring donut. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're traveling places a little bit more exotic than the Midwest most of the time. So,
traveling is also one of my big hobbies, but it is mostly within the Midwest. I do try to get out once in a while, a little further. I've tried to go to the Shakespeare Festival in Ontario at least once a year. Nice. I started doing that, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And I want to get out traveling more internationally than Canada. I don't know. I'd like to get out of the country once every 5 years or something, but I'm still working on that.
It's so much fun getting to go out and experience completely new cultures and just see what they're all about. Like my only experiences have been like Vietnam twice and Ireland once, and each of those times was just amazing. Like the people because I'm very much like, oh, I'm going to make a new friend. You know what I mean? Like I'll just start talking to people. I'm way more outgoing in another country because I'm like, I'm never going to see you again. I don't care what you think of me. So I'm going to talk to you and be super friendly. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm a little bit more domestic in my traveling too. This last year, we're in 2024 now, I have to remind myself. So last year, I went went to some cities I'd never went to. I love going to Midwestern cities. Again, that's kind of like something I really enjoy because even though it's the same, culture, quote unquote, every city's got a different vibe, and like,
totally.
If I go to like Milwaukee or if I go to Cleveland or if I go to Dayton, Ohio, even, it's like, I want to be in the city. I want to go to a good vegan restaurant. I want to find a cool dive bar and go to a record store. If I can squeeze a comic book shop in, awesome. Like, even though it sounds like I'm doing the same thing in every city, all those small businesses and places like that have a unique vibe. So it's like, it's a nice way of getting a little bit of variety, even though you're only a few hours from home instead of halfway across the world,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel like Michigan is a really good place to be to get a variety in your cities, because in West Michigan, it's I don't know, the weather is so different that like you've got fruit in West Michigan, but then you go over to like Detroit and you've got a lot more like a wider immigrant experience, and so you have many more types of restaurants to choose from, or architecture, or festivals and things like that. Like, it's a good place
Michigan
to be.
Is pretty enormous, right? Like, so yeah, like it makes sense that there'd be a lot of varying culture, just even going a little north. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a magical place, Zach. Come visit soon.
Yeah,
so.
I would love to. I've never been to Michigan. That sounds great.
Well, since we already talked about food, I'll jump in and say one of my hobbies is cooking. I very much in the past few years, kind of starting around the time of the lockdown pandemic era, it's like I spent a lot more time in the kitchen, honing my skills. And, I've always was kind of tempted to go to culinary school and maybe do that as a career, but I realized like I cook to relax, and working in the kitchen would not be relaxing. So
yeah,
I found it's very comforting for me to, get home from work or like wake up early on the weekend and just have a plan. Like I want to make this meal or try this technique, and more or less self-taught, although watching a lot of cooking competition shows has kind of inspired me and taught me a lot of things and worked my way around the kitchen. It also has helped that I've been vegetarian for 9 years now, and then been basically vegan for the past 3 at this point. And one of the things I wanted to do, one of the things that kind of inspired me to switch from vegetarian to veganism, was to learn a new set of cooking skills. It's like suddenly it's like I have to have different staples in my pantry, learn how to manipulate flavors, learn how to make tofu interesting. And it's like that challenge kind of really spoke to me, and that's something I've been really important to me. So like I love cooking. I love cooking for people, and it's been a really nice, almost creative outlet in a way to kind of relearn or hone those skills over the past few years.
Cooking was something that Brian and I started doing together during the pandemic, as like, we were at home together all of the time, but we were working, or we were doing our own hobbies and things like that. I was starting a garden, and so like cooking together for dinner was the thing that we did to have like couple time. And then we've also become better cooks because of it.
I imagine that I imagine that going through the pandemic as a couple, you had to do things separately just so you don't want to kill each other eventually.
Yeah. We're also just like very independent people. Like that's one of the
Mm.
reasons we work so well together, but we also live in a really small space. So it's like we just had headphones on all of the time. It's kind of isolating,
That's
but
so funny.
that's how
Yeah.
we made it work. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I totally get what you're saying about vegan cooking though, because like I
Mhm.
enjoy watching like cooking programs, and you really
Yeah.
like to be able to be vegan, you kind of have to become like culinary MacGyver and be able to like twist ingredients to make them into what you're looking for, you know?
Right. Yeah, and it's a weird balance between, I like that sort of like mad scientist sort of experiment, like how do I make this taste like meat, but also like I also like just like my palate has become broader since becoming vegan. So it's like, oh yeah, I actually like just like more vegetables and more different types of food. Now I've done that, and like I really hate to be preachy or annoying, but like for me, veganism has become kind of important, and it's one of the best decisions I've ever made for those reasons. Like it's made me a better cook, maybe learn how to manipulate flavors and textures, and also just like really improve my health, both mental and physically. So again, not to get on my soapbox too much, but like that is something that's kind of been a passion of mine. And again, like I love that challenge. Like, how do I make a really good vegan mac and cheese? And the secret is, oh, you use like squash as the base for your cheese sauce. And then like you add a little miso paste to it. So it kind of has a Parmesan-y texture. It's like learning
Oh.
how different things can mimic flavors, or like how flavors are just chemicals. So it's like, yeah, if you have similar chemicals, it can make different things. So trust me, once I kind of like locked down and made like an amazing tofu scramble, I was like, I've made it. Like I'm a vegan cook now. So
I've peaked.
yes.
All right, well, if I visit Michigan, you have to make me that vegan
Yeah.
mac and cheese. I'm very curious about that sauce.
Okay, for sure.
I live here. You can make it for me anytime.
I'll bring over a batch sometime. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, what about something that one of your hobbies?
I guess I've been trying to figure out what I'm doing to be outside. Like I like being outside, and I just don't know any other way to be like this is a hobby. Because like when I was younger, I was a part of a Boy Scout of America like co-ed Venture Scout program. It was called Venture Scouts, and it got us outside weekly. So I was like really into like scuba diving, backpacking, rock climbing, skiing, all sorts of outdoor sports. And when you don't have a group to do those things with, it's really difficult to keep doing them. So I've really gotten out of the habit of doing those kind of high adventure sports. I even tried to go rock climbing the other day, and I hurt so bad. I'm out of practice. But so instead I started a garden during the pandemic. I've been trying to get out for walks. I figured out how to navigate my local the Kent trails. Paul, you'll be familiar with that.
Yep.
Community hiking trails that are paved. And it's just or if to be a little less active, I set up my my hammock on the porch over the summer, and I'll just like read out there.
Yeah. Again, we're kind of spoiled here in West Michigan because I'm not quite as outdoorsy, but man, in the summer it's about a 40-minute drive. You're on Lake Michigan. It's kind of magical just to be on that big body of water with some beautiful, amazing beaches. Like I try to take advantage of that as much as I can in the summer, at least.
Yeah.
Nice.
I feel like it's a little hard. It's a little harder during the winter, especially if we have snow. The snow turns into ice so easily here. That even like going out for a walk is a little iffy, so that's we're settling into a, it's winter now, and
it is. Yes.
I don't know what to do. I want to go outside, but it's so cold.
I feel you. I mean, I'm in Pennsylvania. I love hiking too. That was actually on my list. It's so much fun getting outdoors, finding new trails, and just experiencing nature. And but yeah, like here, once it gets cold, it is too cold to be doing that. I can't even imagine Michigan winter. There would just be a no-go period.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. But yeah, on the other hand, there are certain times when you're just outside. If you can get a little bit outside the city on a really cold winter's day when there's no clouds, and it feels like you can look through like all of time and space. If you look straight up, it's like on a clear winter's night when like somehow the air seems like thinner because it's cold.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's certain times like I try to catch myself or try to at least give myself moments to really appreciate the sort of beauty of like where we live here in Michigan. So I'm not quite as outdoorsy. I think I got my fill of like being outside and going camping when I was in Boy Scouts. Once I could afford a hotel room, I was like, I'm not camping anymore. So. Zach, anything else? You mentioned hiking and traveling. Something else you like to do as a hobby?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed writing. I actually my degree it was focused in writing, and it was always something that I like. Even in high school, my favorite classes were like English courses and creative writing and stuff like that. Like, or even acting classes where we would get to create and put on like skits and plays and stuff like that. Like, and it's one of those things that I've always wanted to write something and get it published, but I also have that like crippling imposter syndrome where I'll write a whole bunch of something and be like, this is trash, and then start over or just go on to another project. I've got like half of a fantasy novel written that I've been writing for about 10 years, and I constantly revisit it and start new, like, oh, that chapter sucked, and redo it, or things like that. Like finding ways to keep myself from completing the task, which is something that I really would like to try and remedy. And just because everything that I know about writing is once you start, you just need to finish it. Just finish the draft. Don't think about it. Just finish the damn draft, and then go from there. But yeah, I love writing fantasy stuff for the most part. Especially I've got a ton of other ideas floating around in my head. I've got a really cool idea for a superhero one that I could tell you more about off the air, but I don't want anyone else to, I don't want to put it on a podcast where someone could steal it. But yeah, I've got, it's, again though, with podcasting and with spending a lot of time reading and doing research for the comics that we love, hasn't given me a lot of time to get into writing as much lately. So I would like to make more time in the new year.
Actually, my bachelor's degree, I had a minor in writing.
Oh yeah,
and it was fiction writing, and I really haven't written almost any fiction since I got my degree. But I do write a lot of like nonfiction, like instructional things for work. And I don't know, I have a niche in it, and basically I should have studied nonfiction writing is what I'm getting at.
it's more your bag now.
I guess so. I didn't really find it fun, but it sure is useful.
The only writing that I get to do now, and because I still get to like scratch the itch a little with the comics that we love, because like a while back I had a website where I was writing articles, and then the way that I, like, Paul, you've seen my notes, like I do a lot of like deep research, and then I write it all out, and like that, it's really the only way I get to scratch that itch anymore is in that way. I guess kind of nonfiction-y as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. My academic career is in philosophy. I have my master's in philosophy, so I did a lot of writing, and it's all very technical, the specific kind of writing, and I kind of really enjoyed that. And the problem is, like, it's when you're doing it for school, it's like that's all you do without any reason to do it. Since I've graduated, it becomes harder and harder to find time or things to write about. I have had a few things published over the past few years. That SecuArt, which is a comic book focused sort of analysis criticism website. I've had a few things published by them over the past few years, which I really enjoy doing. But again, I kind of need an editor and a deadline breathing down my neck to get stuff done. I can't just do it
Totally
on my own as a fun hobby. But I mean, it's such a different discipline because, like, I try to write very precise, and I have a clear goal. This is what I'm trying to convey. This is the point I'm making. The idea of trying to write something fictional where you're just kind of making it up and letting the story take you where it goes, that sounds both appealing and terrifying. Like, I couldn't imagine actually sitting down and trying to do that.
It's so daunting because, like, with the fantasy novel, you've got to, if you're creating your own world, you have to come up with that world like front to back beforehand. Like, it's a bad idea to not. Like, I in the last episode I mentioned the Wheel of Time. Like, if you're not familiar, it's like a 14-book fantasy series. Robert Jordan, when he passed away and Brandon Sanderson took over the series, he inherited 32,000 pages of notes about the world that Robert Jordan had created. Like, down to this city, here's how they dress, here's their slang, here's some things about the things they eat. Like, he really dug in. And like, when you're doing fantasy, you kind of have to a point. And that part alone, before you even get to write the story, is horrifying and daunting. Yeah.
I always am fascinated when people talk about creative writing, or like, even in comics, when writers talk about, they'll just, the story like comes to them naturally. They might have an ending in mind, but how they get there might change, or like having characters, knowing dialogue because they just hear the characters speaking it in their head. Like, I mean, that level of like creativity and openness is like, again, like really fascinating to me. I just have never been able to like do it. So maybe that's why I find it so fascinating to hear about people's process when it comes to creative endeavors like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you have any creative hobbies?
I sure do, Kate. I do collage art, something I've been doing basically as a hobby for the past 15 years or so. I don't, it comes and goes. Sometimes I'm very creative and productive. Sometimes I can go months without really doing it. I have a whole little collage desk in my office here, where I just stacks of old magazines, clippings I've cut out of them, old dried up glue sticks I have to replace. But it's a really fun hobby because it's something that kind of anyone can do. You just have to have some old magazines and some scissors and a glue stick. But I've found the longer I've done it, I've really found or honed my approach. So when I first started doing it, I was really inspired by Robert Pollard, who's an artist and musician. He's the lead singer of this band, Guided by Voices, probably my favorite band. And he does a lot of the album covers. They're all these amazing collage pieces. And like, that's what he does. Like he's made a lot more collages than music. Like that's kind of his, something he's really passionate about. And when I started doing collages, I gravitated to his work. When I found out that Jack Kirby did collage pages for some of his comics, I was like, oh man, this is amazing. I look at his stuff, and all their work is kind of like busy in a way that my work isn't now. It's kind of been, again, it's been nice over the years. Like, all right, I was inspired by that stuff and I tried to mimic it when I started, but now I've really found my own approach. I really like playing with shape and color, making very simple pieces with a lot of negative space. It's very relaxing and rewarding. And, one of my collages was used by a friend's band, the band Radiator Hospital. If any power pop Philadelphia fans are out there, Radiator Hospital used one of my one of my collages for an album cover for the album Something Wild. So every time I'm in a record store, I'll go to that section. I'm like, do they have it? Like, oh, there it is. Like, I made that album. That's
That's
album
awesome.
That's cool. So, if you're curious, want to see more of my work, I'll do a shameless plug. Go over to Instagram, put in Cut Paper Planets at Cut Paper Planets, and that's a small sampling. I've got well over 150 pieces I need to get scanned and put up there at some point. There's a small sampling of more recent work up there. So again, that's something that it's weird for me to call it artwork because it's just a hobby, but over the years I've been more comfortable calling myself a legitimate quote unquote artist doing that stuff. So
I feel like it's hard to call yourself an artist. Like I'm a graphic designer. That's a type of art. And
Exactly,
I'm like, I don't know if I'm an artist.
I'm looking at your Instagram now, and these are really cool.
Oh, thank you, Zach. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I really like this.
Yeah, it's something that, again, it's something that anyone can kind of do, but I like that everyone does it, approaches it differently. And like, I found my own unique voice. And I'm like, again, I feel like the work I'm doing now, I'm more proud of in a way. So yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I like the way you at least from what I'm seeing is you have one thing that like pops, like it's like these nice backgrounds and like everything around is really cool. And then there's something that just like pops and catches your eye. Like there is like something like a focal point, and it's really cool. I'm really digging it.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah. It's I don't want to spend all time talking about how great my collages are. So but again,
talking about this.
Yeah, this is neat.
Where do you get your magazines from?
Oh, a lot of them. Sometimes I'll go to the public library. I used to have like library sales. They'd have old National Geographics. So I'd grab stacks of those. Estate sales. The problem if you go to antique shops, sometimes they're kind of expensive. So you go to a nice estate sale, or there's, some nicer vintage stores around here where you can grab old issues of Life magazine or National Geographics for a couple bucks. I always feel weird buying stuff that I know I'm just going to cut up, but if I can just spend a couple bucks, like it's not that much. I've found recently though, if I go to a used bookstore or to a library sale, travel books, they do all these like amazing picture books of like, here's Madrid, and it's like published. I like stuff that's been kind of vintagey looking. So like 60s, 70s, early 80s magazines and picture books, illustrated children's encyclopedias. You can find great images in there. So I think that's part of it too. Like when I go looking at bookstores, my eye is drawn to stuff. I know I can use that. So it's like doing it as a hobby more regular the past few years has kind of changed the way I approach finding material. So you never know what you're going to find that might click. I have a drawer full of clippings. I'm like, this could be something someday. I just got to find the right context to use it. So yeah, it's kind of like doing a puzzle without direction in a way. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Kait, I know you have another creative hobby, so you can you can pitch in.
I feel like I've had a lot of creative hobbies through the years, and I'll get in like really into one for a couple of years and like get a whole bunch of supplies and things for it, and then I'll like move on to something else. And so now I just have this craft cabinet where every shelf is a different craft, and I'm like, I know that I'll get back into this craft at some point, so I can't get rid of this. But it is all confined to like a 2 foot by 2 foot space, you know. What is not confined to that much space is my yarn collection, because I have gotten into knitting, and that seems to be the thing that's hanging on, because I think I made something around maybe 2013, 2014 for a cosplay. And I think that it was just like I had a cousin try to get me into crochet. And so I had some supplies for this. Like I had some yarn and I had a book that she had given me with like simple stitches and things. But I couldn't get into the crochet. Like I couldn't keep my stitches like the same width. And so like squares ended up as triangles. But with knitting, you've got 2 needles, so you really have to mess up if you end up with a triangle, or a triangle instead of a square. So that was a little bit easier for me to pick up. And I found that I knit a lot of scarves because like they can be so beautiful, and they knit up in like a month or two, depending on how often I knit. And then I end up with Paul, a piece of art, because we're artists, we can say it.
That's right.
Amen.
Yeah. But I never wear these scarves, so I just have a collection of beautiful scarves. And I'm trying to get into making sweaters too. Usually I have 2 projects going, one more complicated, longer term project like a sweater, and then another simpler project that I can do like in front of the TV, or maybe playing D&D over the internet or something when it's not your turn in combat, and it'll be 15 minutes, you know.
Yep.
So I usually have a more simple project for those kind of times. And yeah, if you're a knitter, I'm on a website called Ravelry, where I log all of my projects. Same username as everywhere else. So Kait Elfier. Yeah,
That's cool.
I like it.
It seems like knitting would be very like relaxing. Like it's almost like like ritualistic, or just kind of like, or meditative. It's a very simple, repetitive process. So you can kind of like lose yourself in, or like, you know, it seems like something people are always knitting while doing something else too.
Right. Yes. And it like just engages enough of my brain so that I can like pay attention to, like pay attention to listening to a TV show or an audiobook or a D&D game. So it actually keeps my mind from slipping and just like drifting off if I'm trying to do another thing at the same time.
Yeah. That's funny. Like, you know, I've noticed that too. I think people that are artists, or maybe, you know, creatively minded, like that is something you want to have. Again, it's like almost like meditative. Like I've noticed, like I recently got my, you know, a guitar that I've had for years, kind of like tuned up and fixed up. So it's in my living room now. And like when I'm watching TV, I'll pick it up and just strum along. It's like I'm not really playing anything, but just the action of doing it kind of helps me focus on what I'm watching. So it's like kind of your brain needs something else to like, it's almost too busy. You need to kind of like focus in that way. So I can definitely appreciate that.
It's like a more creative fidget spinner.
Yeah,
basically.
You're not wrong.
No, that's my mom was big into knitting and crocheting, and usually she was doing that when she was in between screaming at Andre the Giant or the $1 Million Man. And it's funny because I don't think I could ever do it, but I kind of, this is gonna get like real deep and sappy, but I kind of miss just like the sound of the needles like scraping against each other, because it makes me think of her, and like, you know, kind of brings me back to a certain time in my life. So that's, you know, but yeah, that's That's my addition to the knitting conversation.
Yeah. It's nice
Yeah,
to know
I
that
think
it
it's
doesn't
cool.
bother other people, that it's a meditative listening experience instead of
Yeah.
annoying.
It's really neat. I've got a blanket that was made by her, like right behind me. I don't
Nice.
know if you can see
There
it,
you go.
but it's like
Yeah.
the green thing right there. Yeah.
Gotcha. I've not made a blanket yet.
And-
That is an undertaking.
Oh yeah, it took her quite a while.
And I like it too that it's functional art. You know, it's like I've always been fascinated
Yeah.
by that. People, it's like it's artistic, but it's also like a craft. You know, it's like it's when you're done, it's a unique piece of something, but it serves a function. It's not just
Mhm.
it's not just a collage that's on a wall. Not to but no, it is something that does have that sort of like aspect of it as well. Yeah,
Some
and
of-
yet it's unique and handmade and special.
Some of
Yeah.
my scarves are just on a wall because they're not getting worn.
And that's fine.
And
You know,
collages on the
most
wall are cool too. Damn it,
Yeah.
Paul!
Exactly.
Don't undertake.
It serves a purpose, right? You look
Yeah.
at it.
It's
I mean,
pretty
most
neat.
museums are just filled with crafts that people made. It wasn't an artistic purpose. It's just an expression, that they just did as a hobby or did as a craft. So yeah, it's all important. So
That's right.
anything else people want to mention? I've got one more I was going to hit on before we wrap up.
I could keep talking about knitting for a while, but
I know,
I'm-
exactly. I mean, I just want to talk about process now.
Yeah.
But I guess it's somewhat related. I've over the past year, I picked up photography as kind of a hobby, shooting on 35 millimeter film. And before anybody calls me out, I already know film is not vegan. There's gelatin in it, and I'm a total
Oh,
hypocrite.
I
But
didn't know
I've
that.
accepted it.
Me neither.
No, yeah, I didn't know that until after I got my first roll developed. I was like, oh man, I can't do this hobby anymore. But no, I've accepted that. It's just a very small amount of gelatin in most film until they can find some sort of way to replace it. But it's a nice hobby. It is something that, again, kind of changes the way I look at the world. I notice now if I go someplace, if I go out to the lake or if I go for a walk in nature, or even I go to a different city, I'm looking for different angles and things to take pictures of. It kind of changes the way you look at the world in a way. So I've had this vintage camera I bought last year and kind of relearning how to use it because I had done photography in college 20 years ago. So it's kind of nice to get back in that. Turns out that it's not as common now that everyone has a camera in their pocket on their phone. So buying a roll of film was like $20. Getting it developed is $20. So it's not a cheap hobby, but it is kind of very rewarding to know that when I got that first roll back from doing it again, only like one picture came out blurry. So I was like, all right, I can still do this, and it's I got a very simple point and shoot camera from Japan that was made in the 60s. It was a nice little investment I did to kind of like have a different hobby. And again, it's a nice souvenir from a trip or doing something that's different from just a file on your phone that you're just going to delete down the road or forget about,
Sure.
So I really enjoyed that as a hobby of the past year.
Nice. I imagine your photography is really nice because just from seeing your collage art, you clearly have like an eye for perspective. So I bet you've got some really cool shots.
Yeah, I try to find interesting angles or interesting looking buildings instead of just like the standard nature photos. I just kind of look for something different. Again, like kind of like collage work, it is changes the way you look at things in an interesting way. And like I really like negative space, as you can tell from some of our recent collages. It's like it's okay if there's just a few things. Nothing has to be complicated. It can just be simple. The same thing if I do photography. It's like let me just find a simple, pleasing image. So yeah, it all kind of ties together. That ties in the creative aspect. It ties in the going out in nature aspect. So it is a kind of perfect hobby in that way.
Yeah, I enjoy like trying to line up a good shot or something, but I've never really studied photography, and then I just use my phone. So then I end up with like 12 shots of like the same tree or something, trying to get like the sun just right in the background, and then I never look at these pictures again.
Yeah, that is. I remember being a kid, and guys, I'm old enough to remember buying cameras when I was a kid and having disposable cameras or like little simple point and shoot cameras when I was younger, and like you only had 24 pictures. Like you had to make each one count. It wasn't like today we could just hit picture on your phone or do the paparazzi thing. And I kind of like split the difference. So the camera I have is a split frame camera, so it takes 2 pictures on each exposure. So that makes sense. So like it only uses half of the exposure when you take a picture. So you get so a normal roll of film has like 36 pictures on it, and then I get 72 pictures because it takes 2 pictures per exposure. So it's like, oh, I can kind of waste some film, to get a good shot. So it's like it's a perfect split the difference between the camera phone and an old camera.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
Do you also have an Instagram where we can follow all your photography?
I will now. I'll set one up.
Good.
So I just mainly post my
Nice,
photography
nice.
on my personal account. But yeah, maybe I should throw some stuff on the other one or make a separate account. I can't juggle that many accounts. So I'll just throw some pictures on the collage account maybe. So it'll be the catch-all for all of my brilliant artwork.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very fun. I really appreciate again letting us peek behind the curtains of your hobbies. Anything else before we call it a day?
This was a great time, and I would love to hear from our other co-hosts about their hobbies, if any of you are listening.
Yeah, definitely. This should, I do agree. This should be a thing that's like an annual where we get to hear from some other people on the show and what they're interested in.
We're also interesting and charming. So yes, we should all celebrate that more often, I think, in addition to celebrating comics. So yeah, once again, thank you so much for sharing all that stuff with us. If you're listening and want to know more about any of this stuff, I'm sure we'd be happy to talk about it at length down the road or on Discord or something like that. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. Be sure to come back next week for a regular episode. We'll be talking comics again. There'll be me and Kait Scotchless joining Mike. We'll be starting 2024 off with a chill episode and talking about comics and getting ready for episode number 400. Like I said already, that'll be on January 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Twitch. Before then, you can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Discord, Goodreads, and YouTube. That's at IRCB Podcast at all those platforms. You can support us on Patreon to get all of the bonus episodes. That's patreon.com/IRCB Podcast. And you can also check out our regular updates and what's coming up. You can do that for free. Infinity Shred is the best band in the known universe. They do all the music for all of our shows. Zander is part human, part animal, all editor. Thank you, Kait. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Mike, for letting me fill in. Thank you for listening. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.